Hello and welcome to our program. U.S. President Donald Trump abruptly canceled the much-anticipated North Korea-U.S. summit that had been set for June 12th in Singapore. In a letter to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, Trump said he feels it is inappropriate to have this meeting at this time. What is behind Trump's sudden cancellation and how will it affect the goal of achieving peace and denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula?
U.S. President Donald Trump canceled the North Korea-U.S. summit that had been scheduled for June 12, hours after North Korea destroyed its Punggye nuclear test site on May 24th. The news was announced in a letter to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Based on the recent statement of North Korea, I have decided to terminate the planned summit in Singapore on June 12th.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who had been laying the groundwork for the summit, pointed at the scathing remarks made by senior North Korean officials about U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton and U.S. Vice President Mike Pence as a reason for the cancellation. He also stated the North did not respond to requests from U.S. officials to discuss logistics for the now canceled summit.
I can add to that, over the past many days, we have endeavored to do what Chairman Kim and I had agreed, was to put preparation teams together to begin to work to prepare for the summit, and we had received no response to our inquiries from them.
In response to Trump's announcement, experts around the world are debating the possible reasons for the breakdown in talks, including China's intervention and an apparent gap between both sides in how to achieve denuclearization. North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Kye-kwan said in a statement that Trump's decision runs counter to the global community's wishes for peace on the Korean Peninsula. But, he added, the North is willing to give the U.S. more time and opportunity to reconsider. On this week's A Road to Peace, we shed light on what lies behind the cancellation of the summit and discuss what it means to the Korean Peninsula.
For today's discussion, we are joined by two experts. Dr. Kim Chang-soo, Research Fellow Emeritus at the Korea Institute for Defense Analyses. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Professor Ernst Lee in the Division of International Studies at Hanyang University. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
President Trump, who has been repeatedly saying that he'll have a very successful meeting with Kim Jong-un, has canceled the meeting. Professor Lee, can you tell us the main reason behind his decision?
In my observation, I think this is just diplomatic gambit. And no party, either the United States or North Korea, wants this discombobulate the current situation. There are signs already happening. Judging from strikingly consolidated North Korea's response, very friendly response from Mr. Trump letter, and also the United States have shown their will that the dialogue should continue, and South Korea and United States will continually, discuss and make things happen. Through the conversation between Kang Kyung-hwa, Foreign Minister of South Korea, and Secretary of State of the United States, so they agreed to continue dialogue and make the atmosphere proper for the summit talk. So judging from that, I think this is just a diplomatic gambit.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I don't agree with your observation because it is very difficult to make a sense out of his sudden decision. I think it makes some sense for the Washingtonians and for the Pyongyang. Even the Pyongyang was really surprised. It was a very big surprise for them because they were really hoping that something is coming to their way. And Mr. Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un will make a great debut on the world stage. But unfortunately, this has not been the case with Mr. Trump, but particularly because still has a very strong distrust about Mr. Kim Jong-un. Because if I look at his letter, for Mr. Kim Jong-un, is one of the things that we were informed that this meeting was requested by North Korea, but that to us is totally irrelevant. This first part is very striking to me because many people just cite the reason why Mr. Trump made kind of a refusal to meeting Mr. Kim Jong-un because the Choi Son-mi or some other high-ranking North Korean officials making a very surprising, all kinds of harsh words and barbed words. But this is just a kind of frontal excuse because this is not the real reason why Mr. Trump made a very big, surprising decision. Otherwise, he should have followed this kind of the long plan, because everything has been going on for the meeting in Singapore just 2 weeks from today. But all of a sudden, why he made this kind of decision? I think there's a lot of things going on at the White House with his staff members, because after long thought, after a long day, after long thought, both sides, the U.S. and DPRK, may come up with a very strong kind of sense that we got to be very careful. We have a lot of concerns, a lot of problems that have not been resolved for the last 70 years. So it will take not just 2 or 3 months to resolve all this. So I think this is a kind of long-held suspicion on both sides that really stopped Mr. Trump give a green light to this pre-planned meeting. So if you look at his letter carefully, they were very kind of upset because this was requested by North Korea, but to that is not totally irrelevant to the United States. I think this really symbolizes where the United States stands right now and how they view this kind of request, so-called request by the Pyongyang leadership. The request should be made by South Korea or by the U.S. because we are not, the United States is not begging a summit to meet with North Korea. Things turn out just the other way around. Okay, seems like Mr. Trump has been begging for a meeting, and that really angered Mr. Trump. We are not begging for a meeting. We are superpower, and actually you are the one who are begging for a meeting. But I think this kind of impression, some of the media pundits here in Seoul and many other places, really, I think, upset Mr. Trump, because this is not what we want. This is not my intention. I really want give a good impression, give a very bright future for the Korean people, North Korean people particularly. But it turned out that I think he's been, in a sense, maybe I have been fooled around by North Korean leadership and all the media worldwide, in Seoul, both in Seoul and Pyongyang. So that's probably the reason why I think, this is my observation, Mr. Trump made a very difficult decision this time. I don't think this is, maybe you might call it kind of diplomatic gambit, but I think this is much beyond that, because there are a lot of reasons behind why he came to this position at this particular point, to cancel this very important meeting. Because he said, we have a long plan for this meeting, but all of a sudden, he called it off. So what was the reason behind all this? Very long history, diplomatic trust, mistrust, and misunderstanding, of course, and also a linguistic misunderstanding, because Mr. Trump, getting all the reports through translation, and but sometimes I know you are pretty sure that much is lost beyond in translations. It's not just a loss in translation, but a kind of perversion and bias and a lot of different misperceptions.
I think they are on the same boat. Their positions are equally, from the beginning, their position has been clearly defined. The reason why I think they are on the same boat, simply the reason why I don't put much emphasis on Trump's letter, the wordings, slightly different from interpretation of what you said. Because from the standpoint of the United States and the North Korea, I think both parties are not well prepared for the summit. The comment from a senior White House officer said, June 12th is in 10 minutes away. That really gives kind of clue how they are prepared. And second, from North Korea's standpoint, when Trump has been escalating pressure on North Korea, how the North should surrender quickly their underground nuclear arsenals. Well, that made North Korea a little bit unprepared for the talks, what to bring on the table, what they have to ask. So both parties needed a very good excuses to gain time. From standpoint of North Korea, there was a victim. The senior government officer said, criticized Vice President Pence, saying that, political dummy. And then North Korea replied back, okay, that's nuclear to nuclear showdown, or political dummies kind of stuff. So both parties were trying to find a good excuse to delay, or to gain the time for both parties to have more preparations on both sides. The reason why they don't want to cancel, because as I said in the beginning, I don't think any party, North Korea or United States, wants to confabulate this kind of situation, because from standpoint of Trump, he's going for middle election, and there are many issues, domestic issues, so needs a breakthrough to clear out these domestic issues. At the same time, from North Korea's standpoint, they have already blow up underground nuclear facilities. So now it's time they have to gain something, they have to get something.
The reason why I cited Mr. Trump's letter itself is very important because we make all kind of different sorts of combinations of justification, excuse of why Mr. Trump made this kind of decision. I think the best source, the best reliable source must be his own writing because he dictated each and every word in his. You should trust it. You have to go to the original source, why Mr. Trump was so upset about the recent statement by Pyongyang, high-ranking officials in Pyongyang, and why he made this kind of very difficult decision. That's the best source, the trustworthy source should be his letter, because the letter really implies a lot, and this really shows where he stands right now and where he's going to, and what has been. So my point is, Singapore is a good place to have this kind of meeting, and that's why they agreed on already a couple of weeks ago. But as time approaches, and we have a lot of concerns on both sides, Washington and Pyongyang, something that they have not discussed fully. So that's why it's just now we're talking about Mr. Trump's. Why Mr. Trump made a big decision? It is not just his own unilateral decision, because something in reaction to what has been talking about, what is going around in Pyongyang, for example. So this is a mutual process, because even though we didn't hear Mr. Kim saying about very briefly, as a response to Mr. Trump's cancellation of the summit meeting, there was a kind of, again, of course, kind of a letter in statement from Pyongyang. That's maybe secondary, tertiary sources to trust. Why? What is the reason behind this? So nobody knows for sure. But my point is, the best way to make a kind of conjecture, what was behind this, is nothing other than his letter, because letter is very important. This is an official letter.
Both of you gave some very reasonable factors as to why this summit was canceled, but a lot of people are suggesting that China may have been a big driving force to North Korea's recent change in attitude, and which may also influenced President Trump's decision to call off the meeting. What's your take on this, Dr. Kim, first?
I think this makes good sense, because China has been behind Pyongyang for on each and every major issues in the past. And this time, meeting Kim Jong-un twice in just a short period of time really means a lot, because Mr. Kim was seeking for some kind of region security guarantees from Washington, but Washington was not forthcoming because he put all kind of conditions for that kind of security assurance. But I think Beijing has come up very quickly to Kim Jong-un, and we are behind you. We are going to give all kind of security, region security guarantees, because if you collapse, this will be a tremendous damage to our national security interests. And this Mr. Xi Jinping has made it very clear over time. So quite naturally, even though Beijing they don't like to acknowledge this kind, their behind the scenes role, I think definitely they played a very important role, particularly in the thinking of Mr. Trump. The China factor was very big.
Well, I think I should agree with Dr. Kim on this point. I think China has a very good excuse to relax tension on North Korea. So North Korea side gained a lot more time to prepare better conditions for summit talks. I don't think this is cancellation again. In my observation, this is just putting off the schedule, delay the schedule for the better time. And as I agree with Dr. Kim, they were mutually not prepared for talks. This is my observation. Well, the letter and words, they are emotional and blunt expressions, but these are, as again, diplomatic words. But clearly, both parties are not ready for the talk. And giving the good seat to China to back to the seat in a car. China was, in a way, out of the car, but they're getting back to the seat and then sitting back together with North Korea. North Korea has more time to prepare in a better condition. That gives, relatively speaking, indirect tension to the United States for North Korea to get a better condition. What
do you make of the timing of President Trump's announcement? Because, it just came couple of hours after North Korea destroyed its Punggye nuclear test site, but its journalists haven't even come home yet.
Right.
Was it because the ceremony itself wasn't satisfying enough for President Trump? What's the reason behind it?
Well, I think I read a book about Trump, his biography.
What did it say?
He's like a dramatic appearing on the stage rather than all foreseen, or projected things. So in a way, I think he will come back again before the end of June, because in July or August, people live on holidays and the tensions or focuses are scattered around. And there are many other important issues like his oil price rising, things like that. So, and then, after summer holidays, mid-election is coming up. So I think the summit talk will resume by the end of June. When, I don't know. However, from standpoint of Mr. Trump, I think he will resume very quickly. And then, from standpoint of North Korea, they have already shown a friendly gesture against, Mr. Trump letter. So, and then they have confirmed both ways. They will continue dialogue, and, things will happen. So, in terms of location, I think Singapore is gone now. But Washington, I don't think this is an option. North Korea, physically, they cannot fly to Washington. Somewhere in Panmunjom or whatever. So in terms of timing, in between, mid-June or end of June, I think the summit talk will resume. Yeah.
So focusing more on North Korea's response to the cancellation of the summits, North Korean Vice Foreign Minister Kim Kye-gwan released a statement saying that it's willing to give more time and opportunity to the United States and that it's still committed to peace on the Korean Peninsula. But Dr. Kim, how can we analyze this kind of statements?
I think Kim Jong-un really means business because this is the best choice for them. Otherwise, if they don't have a meeting with Mr. Trump, all the bright future will be gone, whether it be Singapore or Washington, even in Pyongyang. So they really want to resume these talks. They try to understand why Mr. Trump made a very abrupt decision right now at this moment. But I think they still hold hope that someday will be recognized in the normal states, and Mr. Kim Jong-un will make a tremendous, international debut, because it'll be the kind of respect for the supreme leader, and only because they believe the United States will be the only guarantor, not China, as a matter of fact, for his regional security and safety, and even the welfare of his people. So I think they have tremendous trust, as a matter of fact, in Washington and Mr. Trump. But because Mr. Trump and John Bolton and many other guys around him were coming very tough unexpectedly, so they were responding very negatively to this recent remarks statement in Washington, D.C. But the point, the timing is very important. Why Mr. Trump made that very difficult decision to cancel this meeting right now at this point, before the long holiday, 3-day holiday in Washington, D.C., because they don't want to disregard a very important opportunity, because otherwise, after next Tuesday, when everything come back to normal, there'll be a kind of dilated expectation, and the news value is gone. So I think Mr. Trump is a very sensible guy, and that's why he made this kind of decision on that particular point. But one thing I should bring your attention to is, it was not just an abrupt decision or right to just maybe 1 or 2 hours. It should have been prepared for long, particularly given the kind of not so pleasant meeting with the Trump, because the expectations are running high that we're going to play a very important media role between Pyongyang and Washington. But I think there were many signs coming, as a matter of fact, from the summit that something not so comfortable is going on between the two leaders, whether it be not just translation issues, but something, because they don't have, I think the two leaders have a strong, trust in each other. But when it comes to North Korea, whether they're going to fully comply all these kind of CBMs, IVA, that they don't agree, because the timing and the transparency, all these issues, to us, we believe we can trust North Koreans, and we are talking very closely in Korean. But when it comes to the U.S. and Pyongyang, they may have some difficulty. It will take a much longer time to have a much better understanding on each other. That's why this is not just a sudden decision, maybe within 1 or 2 hours. Mr. Trump has been very angry, very hesitant to continue on this kind of efforts to have a meeting with Singapore. So there were a lot of signs coming, as a matter of fact, before that kind of very important decision by Mr. Trump.
Okay, so Washington has been promising economic benefits in exchange for denuclearization, and the letter also said that Pyongyang has lost its opportunity for great prosperity and wealth. But did the gap between the U.S., what the U.S. had in mind for North Korea, and what North Korea demanded lead to this kind of cancellation of the summits?
We have to understand the position of North Korea and how they interpret the same object. Well, complete, CBID, that's not possible from my observation. Think about it. And North Korea has destroyed underground nuclear arsenals because North Korea has enough data for further development of nuclear weapons. They have missiles. They have enough data. The reason why they go through many experiments is to build up data. Now the computer simulation is good enough. They don't need actual physical underground nuclear arsenal. So that's gone. And having said that, there's no way, I personally think, this is my personal opinion, to take nuclear weapons, completely destroy and bring the facility to the United States. I wouldn't do that if I'm Kim Jong-un. But having the nuclear weapons at hand, now they have to develop the economy. China wants North Korea to be self-sufficient economy and member of the nations of international society. Likewise, China has done. So if that's the case, time is against both parties, the United States and North Korea. So they fully acknowledge that, but there is no all or nothing approach. That Mr. Trump said this is all or nothing. But now the gradual suspension, a gradual opening, gradual delete will be there. So it will take time, but I don't think there will be, the complete CVID is different concept that North Korea has.
Last question. President Moon Jae-in, do you think he was forewarned of the cancellation during his stay in Washington?
I don't think so.
And
no, there's no sign that he was even mentioned or informed about kind of pretty coming decision within one or 2 days.
They seemed very surprised.
Yes, and China also made it very clear we didn't get any indication that he's going to make this kind of very important decision to cancel the meeting right now.
Then from now on, what kind of step does President Moon have to take in order to facilitate talks between Kim and Trump?
Maybe facilitating is too much word. This time maybe moderating, because we have run too fast. I think that may cause sometimes a problem. Sometimes you need some conventional wisdom is, if you're in haste, make a detour. That's why I think this is exactly what we need. That is, instead of going too fast, because we've expected too much particularly within this year. The declaration at the end of the Korean War and signing a peace treaty that's too much. This has been something discussed many years back. That'll take a couple of years because we have so many other issues. US Africa, for example, United Nations Command. These are all interrelated questions, but trying to give a solution to all these very much interrelated questions in one shot within a couple of months is simply too much, almost impossible. So I think actually we are much better on the better course right now because we are coming to it much more cold-minded that, it'll take a long time, and we have counterparts in Pyongyang and Washington. It is not us. They are talking to each other right now. So we have to be playing a very important role, just moderating the speed. If we are running too fast, we have to slow down the speed. If we are too slow, we're going to facilitate the speed. So this is the moderator role. My personal humble advice for my President Moon Jae-in is, we've done a great job so far. So don't be so upset by this kind of drastic announcement by Mr. Trump rather. But we have to take a deep breath and we just find out what is the problem. Not just with the U.S., but there's a lot of problems in Pyongyang because Pyongyang believes they feel very unsafe because of all the new proposals by Washington, even South Korea. They feel very insecure. So I'm sure there are a lot of people talking about internal debates going on, even though Mr. Kim is the supreme leader. But there are a lot of military guys and foreign affairs guys. Okay, our leader, we might have countered this kind of problem in the long run. So there has been some internal debates. I don't know whether it's the right term, but something going on between Mr. Kim and finally reported to Mr. Kim anyway. So this is a two-party related question, not just Mr. Trump's decision to cancel the meeting. So there must be good reason why Mr. Trump made this very, surprising, announcement this time.
I think Korean government should be more prudent, and nobody wants to confabulate this kind of situation. South Korea was caught off guard by the Trump's decision, and that puts South Korea in a very ambiguous position. So I think we have to take time and deep breaths. Yes, I should agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to wrap things up from here. Dr. Kim, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure.
And Professor Lee, thank you also for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, despite the sudden cancellation of a planned meeting, it appears to be that both Trump and Kim are leaving the door open for talks to resume at some point. We'll be keeping a close eye on future developments. Thank you for watching our show today.